10,000 years before the rise of our known civilizations, before empires drew their borders and kings etched their names into stone, the world stood on the edge of transformation. Vast ice sheets blanketed the northern lands, silent giants that ruled continents. The air was sharp, the seasons brutal, and the earth itself seemed to breathe slowly, as if holding its breath before an awakening. Yet beneath that frozen stillness something remarkable stirred, the faint pulse of human intelligence, older and deeper than history dares to remember. We have been told that humanity was primitive then, scattered tribes of hunters bound by survival, speaking in broken tongues and fearing the unknown. But across the valleys and highlands, evidence whispers a different tale. Hidden beneath millennia of soil lie the remnants of a people who measured the stars, who understood geometry before the concept of mathematics was born, and who left behind monuments so precise that even our machines struggle to replicate them. What happened to them? Where did they go? To seek those answers is to walk into the shadowed corners of our own origin story, a story rewritten by time, by catastrophe, by the arrogance of forgetting. Around 1000 B.C., the earth began to change. The glaciers melted, releasing rivers that tore through the land, reshaping mountains, swallowing valleys, and raising the oceans higher than any human had ever seen. Entire coastlines disappeared, taking with them the memory of civilizations that may have thrived in the warmth before the flood. For centuries, the survivors would speak of it not as history, but as myth, the Great Flood, the Deluge. The night the world was cleansed, but myths, if you listen closely, are fragments of truth. Across cultures, from the Sumerians to the Mayans, from the Egyptians to the Greeks, there are stories of a lost golden age, an age when gods walked among men, when knowledge was abundant, and when humanity was connected to the cosmos in ways we can barely comprehend today. Could these myths be distant echoes of a forgotten civilization, one that lived, thrived, and vanished long before our recorded history began? In the dusty plains of Anatolia, at a site now called Göbekli Tepe, archaeologists uncovered stone, circles older than any known temple, built with precision beyond comprehension. Each pillar weighs tons, carved with animals, symbols, and constellations, as if preserving a language that the earth itself has since forgotten. The builders of Göbekli Tepe lived thousands of years before writing, before agriculture, before the wheel, and yet they understood the heavens. How? Some say they were guided by something greater, a knowledge passed down from a time when humans were not just survivors, but observers of the universe. Others believe that long before Sumer and Egypt, before the Indus Valley and the Chinese dynasties, there existed a civilization that spanned continents, connected not by trade, but by a shared understanding of cosmic order. If this was true, then the melting of the ice was not merely a natural event. It was a global reset. The world drowned, and with it, the first memory of humanity. What remained were scattered survivors, the seed-bearers of culture, who carried fragments of that lost knowledge into the future. They became the ancestors of the builders of pyramids, the carvers of megaliths, and the dreamers of myths. The pattern of history seems to repeat: rise, fall, rebirth. Perhaps civilization is not a straight line, but a circle, endlessly turning through ages of light and shadow. What we call the beginning may only be another return, and so, in the quiet after the flood, humanity began again. We built new cities, told new stories, and tried to make sense of what had been lost. But pieces of that ancient world remain, buried beneath deserts, hidden beneath oceans, waiting for eyes that still remember how to see. Somewhere in the sands of Egypt, in the jungles of South America, beneath the waves off Japan, and even in the frozen tundra of Siberia, ruins whisper of knowledge out of time. They align with the stars, follow mathematical constants, and echo a sophistication that seems impossible for their era. Are these coincidences, or are they the footprints of a forgotten age, an age that knew the secrets of the earth long before we did? Science seeks proof, yet proof often comes centuries after truth is first felt. As we dig deeper into our past, we find not simplicity but complexity, not ignorance but intention. The carvings, the alignments, the myths all seem to point toward a single revelation. Humanity is older, wiser, and more mysterious than we've been led to believe. If an advanced civilization once existed before the Great Flood, then everything we think we know about human history changes. The idea of progress collapses. Evolution becomes a spiral, not a ladder. The question is no longer, where did civilization begin, but how many times has it begun and ended before? Each discovery challenges the narrative we built to comfort ourselves, that we are the first to understand, the first to build, the first to dream of the stars. But maybe somewhere out there, in the deep layers of forgotten time, others dreamed before us. And maybe they looked up at the same constellations, wondering, just as we do now, who they truly were. The story of 1000 BC is not about ruins or relics. It's about memory. It's about the fragments of a human story that refuses to die. A story carved into stone, written into myth, and whispered by the earth itself. The deeper we search, the more we realize that history is not a record of the past. It is a mirror, reflecting not where we came from, but what we have lost along the way. This is not just a journey through time. It is a journey through forgetting and remembering, through darkness and rediscovery. It is an invitation to question everything, not only about history but about ourselves, because to understand the past is to awaken the part of us that has been asleep for millennia. We are the descendants of survivors, the children of those who lived through the end of a world and began another. Their echoes still resonate in our DNA, in our dreams, in the instinct that drives us to build, to seek, to wonder. The monuments of 20,000 BC are not just stones. They are messages from the ancient to the modern, from the forgotten to the awakened. And perhaps, when the last piece of this puzzle is found, we will realize that we were never truly the beginning. Ostad. We were only the continuation of a story far older than time itself. You're watching the Wonder Lab, where we explore the mysteries that shape our world and the secrets that time refuses to bury. 10,000 years before the rise of any known civilization, the Earth stood between two worlds, one fading into ice and another waiting to be born. The last ice age was ending. Glaciers that had ruled the planet for millennia began to melt, reshaping continents and rewriting the face of the Earth. The world that emerged from beneath that ice was unrecognizable. Rivers carved new paths, seas swallowed entire landscapes, and mountains broke free from their frozen prisons. Humanity watched as its home was transformed beyond comprehension. This is the dawn of 10,000 BC, a chapter of history that lies buried in silence. A time that most books reduce to a few paragraphs, as if nothing worth remembering had yet begun. We are told that our ancestors wandered as hunters and gatherers, primitive and unaware, learning slowly the first steps toward civilization. But every discovery, every excavation, and every myth suggests otherwise. Beneath the soil, beneath the waves, and beneath the ruins of time, something far older than civilization itself waits to be rediscovered. Across the world, there are traces, fragments of memory carved in stone, echoes of knowledge that should not have existed so early. In Turkey, the temple complex of Göbekli Tepe stands as the oldest known monument of humankind. Its builders, said to be simple nomads, arranged 12-ton pillars with geometric precision, forming astronomical patterns that align with the stars. They possessed mathematics before mathematics had a name. They mapped constellations long before telescopes existed. Who taught them? How did they know? In Egypt, myths speak of a time before the pharaohs, a time when gods ruled the earth, when knowledge came from the stars, and when the Nile was not yet the cradle of civilization, but merely a witness to something greater. In the highlands of Peru, megalithic stones fit together so perfectly that even a blade of grass cannot slip between them, carved with techniques we still cannot replicate. Across the seas in Japan's Yonaguni ruins, submerged terraces and stairways lie hidden beneath the ocean, as if an ancient city had drowned when the waters rose. Are these separate coincidences, or remnants of a single forgotten world? The end of the Ice Age was not gentle. The melting glaciers unleashed chaos. Oceans rose hundreds of feet, swallowing coastal settlements that had flourished during the stability of the Pleistocene. What we call myth, the stories of the Great Flood, the sinking of Atlantis, the destruction of the world by water, might not be fiction at all. They may be the encoded memories of survivors who watched their world vanish beneath the rising tides. Those who escaped carried fragments of their knowledge to higher ground, passing it down through symbols, stonework, and stories. Over time, the details were lost, and the survivors became legends. Humanity's memory is fragile. Empires rise and fall, but nature erases everything in its own time. Earthquakes bury cities, jungles reclaim stone. Oceans hide their secrets beneath pressure and darkness. What remains of 1000 BC is not the story itself, but the outline of something vast, the fingerprint of a civilization erased, leaving behind questions that challenge every assumption we have about human history. We often imagine progress as a straight line, a steady climb from ignorance to intelligence. But what if civilization is not linear at all? What if it moves in cycles, rising, collapsing, and rising again, each time losing a little more of what came before? If so, we may not be the first advanced society on Earth. We may simply be the latest, standing upon the buried bones of others, repeating their achievements and perhaps their mistakes. Look closer at the monuments of antiquity and you'll find a pattern. The orientation of temples to celestial north, the repetition of sacred geometry, the identical myths of creation and destruction, all point toward a shared origin, a common knowledge once global in scale. The builders of Göbekli Tepe, the masons of Sacsayhuaman, the astronomers of Nabta Playa, they may all have inherited the same message, passed down through the survivors of a cataclysm that ended the world of 1000 BC. Our ancestors, the supposed primitives, may have known more than we do about the energies of the earth, the cycles of the stars, and the fragile balance that sustains life. The ruins they left are not just structures, they are reminders. They tell us that civilization does not begin when we invent writing or build cities. It begins when we remember who we are, and when we forget, it ends. In this era, as we look back across 12,000 years, we find ourselves in the same position as those ancient builders, standing at the edge of a changing world, uncertain of what the future holds. Their monuments were warnings, perhaps even guides, markers of a wisdom we no longer understand. To ignore them is to lose the lessons of a past we barely know existed. The story of 1000 BC is not a tale of primitive hunters learning to farm. It is the silent chronicle of a civilization that reached for the stars, that understood the rhythm of the cosmos, and that vanished under the weight of its own catastrophe. We are its echoes, still searching for fragments of memory in stone and legend. The deeper we dig, the more we find that history is not what we thought. It is far older, far stranger, and far more human. Civilization did not begin once. It began again and again, each time rising from the ashes of the one before. And perhaps one day, thousands of years from now, another generation will look back at our ruins and ask the same question we now ask of 1000 BC, who were they? When the Ice Age ended, the planet entered chaos. The frozen heart of the earth began to thaw, releasing rivers that tore through valleys and swallowed entire landscapes. Ice walls taller than mountains collapsed into the oceans, raising sea levels by hundreds of feet. Within mere centuries, the shape of continents changed forever. Land that had been home to life for tens of thousands of years vanished beneath the water, leaving only silence where once there had been voices. Fire and civilization. For those who lived through it, the world must have seemed to be ending. The sky turned gray for years. Storms raged endlessly. The seasons shifted unpredictably. Forests drowned, deserts formed, and the rhythm of life broke apart. Humanity, scattered and fragile, faced its greatest test, survival. But from that chaos, something new began to take shape. As the ice retreated, vast plains opened where glaciers had once stood. Rivers formed fertile valleys, lakes sparkled in new basins, and animals migrated to the reborn lands. Humanity followed, carrying not only the instinct to survive, but the memory of a world that had disappeared. The survivors of the flood became the wanderers of the new earth, the carriers of forgotten knowledge, the keepers of myths. It is said that every civilization begins with a memory of something lost. The stories of the great flood that echo across continents, from the epic of Gilgamesh to the tales of Noah, from the Indian legend of Manu to the Greek story of Deucalion, all speak of destruction followed by renewal. Could these be independent coincidences, or are they fragments of a single shared trauma carried through generations from the survivors of 1000 Eastern BC? When the waters rose, entire regions were swallowed, fertile coastlines that had nurtured humanity's earliest communities. The island nations of today may be the mountain peaks of yesterday. Beneath the waves, divers have found traces of ancient stone walls, stairways and roads that stretch into the deep, haunting remains of cities lost to time. Off the coast of India near Dwarka, ruins rest beneath 40 feet of water. In the waters near Cuba, sonar images reveal geometric structures on the ocean floor. These are not myths. These are questions, written in stone and buried by the sea. It is within this transformation, this planetary rebirth, that the seeds of our known civilizations were planted. The survivors who once lived along the ancient coasts retreated inland, rebuilding their lives near rivers and highlands. They carried fragments of their old world, knowledge of the stars, the cycles of the earth, and the art of shaping stone. They passed it down to their children, who in time became the builders of Sumer, Egypt, and the Indus Valley. The story of civilization, as we know it, begins with their rebirth, but something deeper hides within this pattern. Humanity did not simply survive, it adapted, evolved, and remembered. Across continents, cultures that had never met began building in the same ways, constructing pyramids, aligning temples with celestial bodies, and honoring gods who came from the sky or from across the sea. The same symbols appear in Egypt, in Mesoamerica, in Mesopotamia, in Asia. How could people separated by oceans share such precise knowledge? One theory suggests that they didn't rediscover it. They remembered it. That somewhere in the lost world of 5,000 BC, there existed a civilization so interconnected that its memory survived even when its cities did not. Its people might have been the first navigators, the first astronomers, the first to map the heavens and understand the earth as a living system. When the flood came, they scattered, some to the mountains, others to distant shores. Over generations, their knowledge transformed into myth, their teachers into gods, and their history into legend. Archaeology continues to uncover evidence that defies our conventional timelines. At sites once dismissed as primitive, precision engineering emerges. At depths thought uninhabited, artifacts surface that belong to no known era. The deeper we dig, the older humanity appears. Science hesitates to accept it, but the earth remembers. Every buried ruin, every submerged city, every unexplained monument is a whisper from the past, urging us to question everything we know about who we are. If the Great Melt erased an earlier world, then perhaps civilization is not an invention of a few thousand years ago, but a memory that reawakened after a long sleep. Our ancestors were not inventing, they were rebuilding. They were trying to restore fragments of what was lost. Their monuments were not beginnings, they were echoes. The rebirth of the earth was both a blessing and a curse. It gave humanity a second chance, but it also buried its first. Every myth of paradise lost, every story of divine punishment, every memory of a golden age reflects a deep truth about that transition, the pain of remembering a world that could never return. And maybe deep within us we still carry that ache. The rise of our known civilizations, Sumer, Egypt, the Indus Valley, the Mayans, all share one mysterious pattern. They appeared suddenly fully formed, with language, architecture, mathematics, and astronomy. No gradual evolution, no slow learning curve. It's as if someone lit a torch in the darkness, and humanity instantly remembered what it had once known. Could it be that those ancient builders were not inventing civilization, but restoring it from the ashes of 1000 BC? The Great Melt was more than a geological event. It was a reset button on human history. It wiped the slate clean, leaving only myths to remind us of what came before. But even in that destruction, knowledge survived. Carried in symbols, in numbers, in stories whispered around fires by the descendants of those who refused to forget. Every time we uncover another ruin that should not exist, every time we decode a symbol that predates its known culture, we are not discovering something new. We are remembering something ancient. The flood did not just wash away cities. It washed away certainty, leaving behind a mystery that still calls to us through time. The earth was reborn, but humanity was not starting anew. It was continuing a story that began long before history, long before the written word. And as we stand today, surrounded by the remnants of that forgotten dawn, one question continues to haunt the mind of every seeker. How many times has the world begun? And how many times has it ended? Long before the first city of Mesopotamia rose from the dust, before the first hieroglyph was carved into Egyptian stone, the builders of 10,000 BC had already shaped the earth in ways we are only beginning to understand. Their work, scattered across continents, stands as silent proof that human intelligence, skill, and design existed at a level far beyond what history allows. They were the architects of the forgotten world, a civilization lost not to war or conquest, but to time itself. Across the barren plains of southeastern Turkey lies Göbekli Tepe, the first monument that forced historians to rethink everything. Its stone pillars, arranged in perfect circles, were not the work of primitive tribes. They were the work of planners, astronomers, and engineers. Each pillar is carved from limestone, weighing up to 16 tons. They stand aligned with celestial bodies, forming patterns that mirror the constellations above. But what's most astonishing is not the precision, it's the intention. The site was deliberately buried by its own builders, as if they were protecting a message for the future, hiding knowledge they feared would be lost. Who were these people who could build monuments while most of humanity still hunted with stone tools? What language did they speak? What purpose drove them to carve symbols of lions, snakes, birds, and abstract shapes that seemed to tell a cosmic story? Some say Göbekli Tepe was the first temple, a place of worship. Others believe it was an observatory, a calendar in stone. But perhaps it was both, a fusion of science and spirituality, reflecting a time when knowledge of the heavens was sacred and inseparable from the human soul. Thousands of miles away, in South America, megalithic walls rise high in the Andean mountains. Structures like Sacsayhuaman and Ollantaytambo, built with stones so massive and precisely cut that modern engineers still puzzle over their creation. Each block fits with mathematical perfection, interlocking without mortar, surviving earthquakes for thousands of years. The surfaces are smooth, their angles sharp, their lines flawless, as if shaped by tools capable of melting or softening stone. Yet according to official history, these walls were built by people who did not even have iron. How is that possible? The same mystery echoes in Egypt. The Great Pyramid of Giza, officially dated to around 2500 BC, seems far too advanced for its supposed era. Its alignment with true north is more accurate than most modern constructions. Its base is level to within fractions of an inch. The pyramid's proportions encode mathematical constants like p, pi, and the golden ratio, and its dimensions correspond to the curvature of the earth. Is it coincidence or evidence of a knowledge system inherited from a much older world? From the jungles of Cambodia to the deserts of Peru, from Easter Island to Stonehenge, humanity's earliest builders displayed a shared obsession with the sky. They built monuments that mirrored the stars, temples that aligned with solstices, and cities that reflected constellations. It's as if they were trying to preserve a cosmic blueprint, a memory of the universe itself. And that memory seems to reach back far before our known civilizations, back to an era when knowledge of the heavens was universal. Could it be that the builders of these ancient monuments were not separate cultures learning on their own, but descendants of one global civilization that existed before the Great Melt, a civilization that understood the Earth as part of a larger cosmic system? Their ruins suggest connection, the same geometry, the same measurements, the same reverence for the stars. These are not random similarities. They are fingerprints. Mainstream science often dismisses such theories as coincidence or speculation. But coincidence cannot explain precision. It cannot explain how civilizations separated by oceans used the same mathematical ratios, the same sacred geometry, and the same celestial references. It cannot explain why so many ancient myths describe gods descending from the sky to teach humanity how to build, how to farm, and how to measure the heavens. Perhaps these gods were not deities at all, but the last survivors of a forgotten people, teachers from the age before history, trying to preserve what remained of their lost world. Many ancient texts hint at this possibility. The Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki, beings who came from above to impart knowledge and order. The Egyptians revered Thoth, the keeper of wisdom who brought writing and architecture. The Mayans told of Kukulkan, the feathered serpent who taught astronomy and the calendar. The Greeks remembered Prometheus, who gave mankind the fire of knowledge. Each myth, across every culture, speaks of a moment when humanity was lifted from darkness by a force of enlightenment. What if these stories are not myths, but memories, distorted by time but rooted in truth? Some researchers believe that remnants of the ancient builders' knowledge survived through secret traditions, encoded in symbols, mathematics, and architecture. From the spirals carved into megaliths to the golden ratios hidden in cathedrals, their influence echoes even in our modern world. The builders of 1000 BC may be gone, but their language remains, not spoken, but built, written in stone. Perhaps that was their intention. They knew time would erode memory, destroy records, and silence voices. But stone endures, and so they spoke through it. Every pillar, every carving, every alignment was a word in a language meant for the future. They built monuments not to be worshipped, but to be remembered. They were not only builders of structures, they were builders of continuity. If we listen closely, the stones still speak. They tell us that knowledge is cyclical, that civilizations rise, fall, and rise again, that progress is not invention, but remembrance. We are not the first to measure the stars or to wonder about the cosmos. We are simply the next chapter of a story that began long before history. The story of humanity's endless attempt to understand its place in the universe. The builders of the forgotten world have left us a message, scattered across continents, hidden in plain sight. It tells us that the answers we seek about who we are do not lie in the future. They lie in the deep past. In the ruins buried under layers of earth, in the myths we dismiss as fantasy, and in the stars that have always been watching over us. We are not the first civilization. We are the descendants of one that came before, and perhaps one day we too will be the ancestors of another that rises after us. Beneath the ground we walk on lies another world, a silent archive of everything we've forgotten. The soil, the rocks, and the shifting layers of sediment are not just dirt and stone. They are pages of time, stacked one over another, keeping secrets that history never wrote. And when those layers are disturbed by an archaeologist's brush, by a miner's shovel, or by the slow carving of a river, the earth briefly whispers what it remembers. In the deserts of Egypt, satellite scans have revealed enormous rectangular anomalies hidden beneath the sand, shapes too geometric to be natural, stretching for miles, arranged in deliberate order. They are invisible to the naked eye, yet infrared imaging shows them glowing faintly under the dunes like the blueprints of an ancient city that once breathed life before the desert claimed it. Who built them? When? And why do they match the orientations of star clusters thousands of light years away? Far to the west, in the jungles of Guatemala, archaeologists used LIDAR to strip away the canopy of trees, and what they saw changed everything. Beneath the vines lay the ruins of more than 60,000 structures, roads, fortifications, and pyramids so vast that they rewrote the map of the ancient Maya. But among those ruins, deeper still, were older foundations, stones that did not belong to the Maya at all. Stones that predated them by thousands of years, weathered beyond recognition, suggesting that the jungle had swallowed not one civilization, but several, layered like time itself. And then there is the floor of the ocean. When sonar scans the coastlines of India, Japan, and the Caribbean, it draws ghostly outlines, roads, walls, staircases, stretching across the seabed. In the Bay of Cambay, off the coast of Gujarat, a team discovered massive stone structures 9 kilometers long, submerged under 120 feet of water. Carbon samples from the site date back almost 10,000 years, the same age as Göbekli Tepe. If these dates hold true, they mean something astonishing. At the very dawn of agriculture, people were already building cities. Not huts, not camps, cities. In the Atlantic, off the shores of Cuba, deep-sea engineers mapping the ocean floor detected symmetrical pyramidal forms at depths of 700 meters. The water there has been that deep for more than 10,000 years. To build at that depth would require air, land, and light, conditions that existed only before the last great flood. Could this be a fragment of the same event remembered by every ancient culture, the flood of Noah, the deluge of Gilgamesh, the sinking of Atlantis? Different names, one memory. When we sift through the Earth's hidden record, strange objects also emerge, relics that should not exist where they are found. A polished aluminum gear encased in coal, millions of years old. A hammered metal sphere discovered in a Precambrian layer of South Africa. A carved stone map of the stars found in Colombia showing constellations as they appeared 12,000 years ago. Science calls them anomalies. The Earth calls them memories. Each one whispers that human history is not linear. It is cyclical, punctuated by creation and erasure, discovery and loss. Even Antarctica, a continent of ice, has joined the chorus. Radar mapping beneath its frozen crust reveals mountain ranges, rivers, and what appear to be man-made grids now sealed under kilometers of ice. If the continent was once free of glaciers, as geological evidence suggests, could it have been home to a civilization wiped out when the poles shifted and the world froze? Ancient maps like the Peary Race chart of 1513 show Antarctica's coastline with startling accuracy centuries before it was discovered and drawn without ice. How could sailors of the Renaissance know a shoreline buried for 12,000 years unless they were copying from maps far older than civilization itself? Every discovery beneath the earth challenges the narrative we've been taught, the story that humanity rose slowly from caves to cities, from ignorance to intellect. But the evidence does not rise, it sinks. Our greatest secrets are not ahead of us, but below us. The further we dig, the older the sophistication becomes, as if we are tracing civilization backward, following a descending spiral into an age that once shone brighter than our own. Perhaps that is why so many myths speak of underworlds, not as realms of the dead, but as memories of buried worlds. The Greeks called it Hades, the Egyptians called it Duat, the Sumerians called it the land of the forgotten. Maybe they were not speaking of a place beyond life, but of a civilization beneath the earth, entombed by time, awaiting rediscovery, and every core sample drilled, every fossil uncovered, every relic unearthed. We are not just studying geology or archaeology. We are listening to Earth's recollection of itself, and it remembers everything. It remembers the roar of ancient oceans that swallowed cities whole. It remembers the trembling of continents, the rise and fall of mountains, the fire that reshaped horizons. And somewhere within that memory, it remembers us, not as we are now, but as we were before history began. We have always believed that progress moves forward, that the line of human knowledge stretches from past to future, from darkness to light. But what if the line is a circle? What if we have already reached the peak before us and fallen only to climb again? Each layer of Earth may be a bookmark left by an earlier chapter of our species, waiting for the next reader to turn the page. And now, as satellites map what shovels cannot reach, and algorithms read what eyes overlook, the Earth begins to reveal its archive in full. It's as though time itself is tired of keeping secrets. Bit by bit, the evidence rises from beneath, asking us to listen, to question, to remember, because every civilization that forgets its past is destined to repeat it. Every civilization carries a myth of destruction, a story of fire from the sky, of waters that swallowed the earth, of a night when the stars fell silent and the world was reborn. For centuries we dismissed these tales as symbolic, poetic echoes of natural disasters exaggerated by memory. But what if they were not myths at all? What if they were testimonies, eyewitness accounts passed through generations, describing an event so massive, so world-changing, that it scarred the human story forever? Around 12,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, something happened. Something that melted glaciers in a geological instant. The planet warmed not gradually, but violently. In less than a decade, the ice sheets that had stood for millions of years began to collapse. Rivers swelled into oceans, seas rose hundreds of feet. Entire coastlines vanished, and with them, the memory of a world before the flood. Modern science calls this period the Younger Dryas Boundary Event. It began mysteriously around 10 to 800 BC, the same era when many of the world's oldest ruins seem to appear and others vanish. The evidence is scattered but compelling. A thin layer of black sediment found across North America, Europe, and parts of the Middle East, rich in iridium, platinum, and microscopic spherules of melted glass. These are the fingerprints of cosmic fire, the debris of a massive impact. A comet, or perhaps a cluster of them, shattered in the atmosphere, raining fragments of flame across continents. The result was instant devastation. Wildfires that swept entire forests, shock waves that flattened plains, and a dust cloud that darkened the sky for years. In that darkness, the great ice sheets melted, releasing walls of water that thundered across the land. Imagine it, the sound of continents drowning. Rivers became oceans overnight. Cities, if they existed, were swallowed whole. Mountains turned into islands. And the people who survived must have watched their world die beneath them, powerless against the flood that seemed to come from the heavens themselves. Ancient texts describe it in haunting detail. The Sumerians wrote of the flood that erased the first kings of the earth. The Egyptians spoke of a great deluge sent by the gods to purify mankind. The Greeks told of Deucalion, who built an ark to save his family when Zeus drowned the world. And halfway across the planet, the Maya, the Hopi, and the Aboriginal Australians told nearly identical stories of fire, water, and rebirth. Different lands, different tongues, one memory. In geological terms, it was the end of the Pleistocene and the birth of the Holocene. But in human terms, it was the end of an age. Whatever civilizations existed before the flood, whatever knowledge they had gathered, whatever structures they had built, were wiped clean from the map. Only the highest places, mountains, plateaus, isolated sanctuaries, remained untouched. Perhaps that is why so many ancient temples and sacred sites sit atop mountains, as if the survivors of the cataclysm sought to rebuild where the waters could not reach. Göbekli Tepe, for example, rose shortly after the floodwaters receded, around 9600 BC, the very same date that Plato gave for the sinking of Atlantis. Is it coincidence that both the myth and the archaeology point to the same moment in time? Or is Plato's tale not fiction, but faint memory, an echo of the world that perished when the skies fell and the seas rose? Even now the scars of that disaster are visible. Beneath the Great Lakes lie channels carved by torrents of meltwater, powerful enough to move mountains. The Carolina Bays on the American coast, elliptical depressions that dot the landscape for miles, still bear the marks of high-velocity impacts. And under Greenland's ice, radar imaging reveals a massive crater 31 kilometers wide, large enough to have unleashed the fires of an age. The survivors of the cataclysm would have faced a planet transformed. Their maps were useless, their lands unrecognizable. A climate once cool and fertile turned chaotic. Animals vanished. The megafauna, mammoths, saber-toothed cats, giant sloths, all disappeared in the same instant. Humanity was forced to start again from ash and mud. They became nomads, gatherers, storytellers, carrying fragments of memory from a world no longer there. Perhaps that is why myths of gods descending from the sky appear right after the flood. Perhaps those gods were the remnants of that lost civilization, teachers and engineers who survived on high ground, helping the scattered tribes rebuild. To primitive survivors they must have seemed divine, but in truth they were simply remembering what had once been ordinary. In their hands knowledge became myth, and myth became the foundation of our history. The great cataclysm was not just a natural disaster, it was a reset, a cleansing of the Earth's memory, and like all cycles, it may not have been the first, nor will it be the last. Because the universe does not destroy out of malice, it renews. It erases to begin again. Every sunrise we see, every river that flows, every whisper of wind through an ancient ruin is a reminder. The earth has ended before, and it will end again. Yet life always returns. Civilization always rebuilds. And somewhere in that endless cycle, humanity continues its search for meaning, looking for the fragments of who we were, so we can understand who we are. When the waters receded and the smoke of the cataclysm faded into the sky, the world that emerged was unrecognizable. Forests had vanished. Coastlines had changed. Mountains that once stood proud now lay broken. The survivors, few, scattered, and haunted, stood in silence among the ruins of everything they had known. They were not the heroes of myth or the kings of temples. They were wanderers, farmers, hunters, and dreamers. The last echoes of a forgotten age, clutching fragments of memory in a world that had forgotten itself. It is said that after the flood the gods walked among men once more. But perhaps those gods were simply survivors, remnants of the lost civilization that had perished in the great cataclysm. They remembered what others could not. They knew the stars, the seasons, the art of building, the mysteries of the earth. To the new generations, born in a world of ash, their knowledge would have seemed divine. And so the survivors became teachers. From their scattered sanctuaries, they began to rebuild. High in the plateaus of Anatolia, they raised new monuments, circles of stone, carved with the images of the animals that had once ruled the earth. In Egypt they taught how to measure the heavens and build with geometry, birthing the first architects. Along the rivers of Mesopotamia, they passed on the secrets of irrigation, transforming barren land into the cradle of civilization. In the Andes, they preserved the sacred alignment between the earth and the sky, building terraces that mirrored constellations. Across the ocean, in the jungles of Mesoamerica, they left the mathematics of time itself, calendars so precise they still outwit our machines. Everywhere, across every continent, the same pattern appeared. New civilizations rose from nowhere, not gradually but suddenly, as if awakened from a deep sleep. They built in stone when their neighbors still lived in wood and clay. They looked to the stars with an understanding no one else possessed. They spoke of gods who had come from the sea or from the mountains or from the heavens, always bringing knowledge. And in their myths, one theme remained constant. The world had been destroyed once before. But these survivors carried more than skill. They carried memory. They remembered the fire from the sky, the flood that erased the world, and the warning that such cycles never end. To preserve what they knew, they built for eternity. They carved their knowledge into rock, aligned their monuments with celestial markers, and hid their wisdom in stories, symbols, and rituals that would outlast time. We can still read those stories today. The Sumerians wrote of kings who ruled for thousands of years before the flood. The Egyptians spoke of the Zep Tepi, the first time, when gods and men walked together. The Greeks remembered a golden age that ended in flame, and the Hopi people of North America told of previous worlds destroyed by water and fire. Just as we tell of history's ages, not linear, but circular, to understand these myths is to glimpse the mindset of the survivors. They did not see the flood as punishment. They saw it as a reset. A reminder that no knowledge is permanent, no empire eternal. That the earth gives and the earth takes away. And so they built with reverence. Every temple, every alignment, every ritual was a conversation between humanity and the planet, a promise never to forget again. Perhaps this is why the earliest civilizations seem to have appeared fully formed. Sumer, Egypt, the Indus Valley, the Andes, all seem to begin not at their birth, but at their rebirth. There are no signs of slow progress, no primitive stages leading up to their genius. Their languages appear complete, their architecture perfected, their mathematics already divine. They were not inventing civilization, they were remembering it. Imagine standing in their world, a dawn after the end of time. The air still heavy with the scent of ash, the sky bruised with colors unknown to us. Around you, the broken monuments of the old world rise from the mud, whispering names no one remembers. And among the survivors, the elders gather, speaking of what once was, of a world where men spoke to stars, where stone and spirit were one, where the earth was whole. They knew they could not rebuild what had been lost, but they could ensure its spirit endured. And so they began again. Each generation passed the knowledge down, through story, symbol, and ritual. But with time, memory faded. The gods became myths. The survivors became legends. And the truth, the real story of who they were, dissolved into mystery. All that remained were monuments pointing to the sky and stories of a world that fell into the sea, and yet, somewhere within us, that memory survives. Every human who gazes at the stars, who feels awe before the unknown, who wonders about the beginning, is reliving that same ancient longing, the longing to remember, the longing to rebuild. Because perhaps we, too, are the descendants of those survivors, carrying their spark in our curiosity, their resilience in our bones. The flood may have erased their world, but not their essence. That essence lives in every question we ask, in every monument we raise, in every dream of reaching beyond ourselves. Civilization may die, but the will to create never does. Knowledge, true knowledge, is not written on paper or stored in machines. It is carved into the bones of civilizations. And every age of humanity, no matter how far apart, seems to whisper the same story, that once, long ago, there existed a people who knew the heavens, who understood the language of nature, and who passed that wisdom down through sacred geometry, star maps, and myth. To some they were gods, to others simply teachers, but in truth they may have been both. The last custodians of a world that perished, leaving behind fragments of a universal science too advanced for its time. Every ancient culture speaks of them. The Egyptians called them the Neteru, divine beings who taught order, writing, and the movement of the stars. The Sumerians called them the Anunnaki, the ones who descended from the heavens to bring civilization. The Greeks spoke of the Titan Prometheus, who gave humanity the fire of knowledge. And across the ocean, the Maya remembered Kukulkan, the feathered serpent, the luminous teacher who arrived after the flood to rebuild the world. Different names, same essence. Beings of light, wisdom, and technology, not supernatural but supremely human. Carriers of the lost memory of 1000 BC, their legacy is written in architecture. Look closely at the world's oldest monuments. The Great Pyramid of Giza, Stonehenge, Machu Picchu, Teotihuacan, Angkor Wat, and you will see the same pattern emerge. Alignment with the stars. The pyramids of Egypt mirror Orion's belt. The temples of Angkor Match the constellation Draco. The streets of Teotihuacan form a map of the Milky Way. Even the stones of Stonehenge trace the path of the sun and moon with astronomical precision. How did these ancient builders, separated by oceans and millennia, know the same celestial code? It was not coincidence, it was inheritance. A mathematical language passed from teacher to disciple, from survivor to civilization. They understood the cosmos as a living organism, a rhythm of cycles, geometry, and vibration. Their monuments were not merely tombs or temples. They were instruments. They resonated with the earth's energy, tracked the pulse of the heavens, and mirrored the invisible harmony between matter and mind. The secret they guarded was simple, yet profound. As above, so below. The idea that the universe and the human spirit are reflections of one another, that what happens in the sky is echoed in the soul. This was the first science, the science of connection. To them, astronomy was not separate from philosophy, and geometry was not separate from divinity. Numbers, stars, and symbols were one language, the language of creation. Even today we find traces of that knowledge hidden in plain sight. In the proportions of the Great Pyramid, which encode the mathematical constant P and the golden ratio F. In the alignment of ancient temples that mark equinoxes and solstices with perfect accuracy. In the sacred geometry found in everything from a sunflower spiral to a galaxy's arm. These are not coincidences. They are signatures of an intelligence that saw the universe as pattern, not chaos. Ancient manuscripts describe how these early teachers built using sound and light. Legends from Egypt to Tibet speak of stones moved by vibration, of architects who chanted frequencies that lifted monoliths into the air. To modern ears, these sound like fantasy, but in laboratories today, we are rediscovering the same principle, that sound can levitate, light can shape matter, and resonance can alter reality. Perhaps the ancients did not have technology as we imagine it, but they understood the hidden mechanics of nature itself. Their temples were not places of worship. They were machines of consciousness. Every angle, every carving, every corridor was designed to tune the human mind to the cosmos. The resonance of chanting in the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid, the echo of drums inside Mayan pyramids, the whispering acoustics of Delphi, all suggest architecture built not just for the body, but for the soul. The ancients were engineers of energy, manipulating sound, light, and geometry to awaken what we might now call higher awareness. And yet, this knowledge was never meant for all. It was guarded, protected, and encoded in symbols only the initiates could read. Over centuries, it became the foundation of mystery schools in Egypt, in Greece, in the East, where students learned that to know the universe, one must first know oneself. The temples became the first universities. The priests became the scientists. The myths became equations written in poetry. When modern science looks back at these civilizations, it often sees superstition, but perhaps we are the ones who are blind. We have technology, but we have forgotten wisdom. We have data, but not understanding. The ancients sought harmony. We seek control. They built monuments to balance the earth and the sky. We build towers that block the sun. And yet, deep within our consciousness, we still crave what they knew, the unity of all things. Maybe that's why their knowledge still calls to us. Every time we stand before a pyramid, a temple, or a circle of stone, something inside us stirs. Not curiosity, but recognition. It feels familiar because it is familiar. It is our own forgotten knowledge, written in a language of geometry, waiting for us to remember how to read it again. The ancients once said, "When the pupil forgets, the temple sleeps," and perhaps that is the story of our world. The temples are still here. The monuments still stand. The equations still shine in the stars. It is we who have fallen asleep. But every discovery, every mystery, every question we dare to ask is a knock on that ancient door, and somewhere the temple begins to wake, because knowledge never dies. It only waits. The further we look back, the clearer it becomes. Our ancestors were not isolated tribes fumbling in darkness. They were connected across oceans, across continents, across the boundaries of what we once thought possible. They shared a single pattern, a universal design, a code that spoke one language, geometry, astronomy, and alignment, long before the age of empires, before writing, before the first kings of Egypt or Sumer. This code already existed, carved in stone, aligned with stars, and whispered through symbols scattered like breadcrumbs across the planet. How is it that the pyramids of Giza in Egypt and the pyramids of Teotihuacan in Mexico mirror each other in form and celestial alignment, despite being built thousands of years apart and separated by an ocean? How is it that ancient temples in Cambodia, Peru, and Mesopotamia all follow the same sacred mathematical proportions? The golden ratio, the square root of 2, the cosmic constant P. Coincidence does not build monuments with mathematical perfection. Coincidence does not align entire cities to solstices and star systems. Coincidence does not leave behind identical myths of floods, gods, and rebirth on every continent. Something or someone once connected them all. Ancient explorers may have crossed the seas long before recorded history. But it's not just navigation that unites these civilizations. It's knowledge. A single global code that expressed the same truth in different tongues. It was a way of seeing the universe not as chaos, but as harmony, a mirror where the earth, the stars, and human life all reflected one another. In the Andes Mountains, the Incas built Machu Picchu aligned perfectly to the solstice sunrise. Half a world away, in Egypt, the Great Pyramid's shafts point directly to the same stars. In Cambodia, the towers of Angkor Wat form the constellation of Draco. In China, the ancient pyramids near Xi'an face the celestial north with the same precision as those in Giza. Across the Pacific, the Moai of Easter Island, massive stone faces, watch the horizon as if guarding an ancient astronomical secret. Each monument whispers the same message. We once knew the sky, and beneath these alignments there lies an even deeper mystery. The number code. All over the world, the same sacred numbers appear, 3, 6, 9, 12, the very numbers Nikola Tesla later called the key to the universe. The Egyptians encoded them in the dimensions of their temples. The Mayans built their calendar around them. The Sumerians used a base 60 system, the origin of our 60 seconds and 360 degrees. Even our time, our geometry, our measurements are echoes of that ancient system, as if we are still using the mathematics of a forgotten age. And then there are the symbols, the spiral, the serpent, the sun disk, the eye, the cross within the circle. You see them in Egypt, in the Americas, in India, in the Celtic world, the same shapes repeating like a cosmic signature. They are not just decoration, they are information. The spiral represents motion, energy, and creation. The serpent represents knowledge and transformation. The sun disk, the eternal source of life. These are the universal constants of human understanding, a shared vocabulary that transcends culture and time. Archaeologists struggle to explain this unity. How could people separated by oceans invent the same designs, the same gods, the same mathematics? The old answer was coincidence, but now the evidence suggests something greater, a memory. A cultural DNA passed down from a civilization that existed before the flood, before the written word, before 1000 BC. A civilization that did not simply vanish, it fragmented. leaving behind seeds of knowledge that grew into Egypt, Sumer, Indus, Maya, and the rest. Imagine, after a cataclysm, survivors scattered to every corner of the earth, carrying fragments of science, astronomy, and myth. In time, their descendants forgot the origin, but remembered the symbols. They built pyramids because their ancestors had. They aligned their temples to the stars because that was the ancient law. They preserved rituals whose meanings they no longer understood, echoes of a lost world trying to speak through them. Modern research is beginning to confirm what ancient legends always knew. From DNA studies to geology, from linguistics to architecture, the evidence grows that humanity may have been far more connected and far more advanced than we ever imagined. Take the map of Piri Reis, drawn in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral. It shows Antarctica beneath the ice, a detail only modern satellites confirmed. Piri Reis himself claimed he copied it from ancient sources, older than Egypt, older than Babylon. Who drew those original maps? Who charted lands that were supposed to be unknown until thousands of years later? And what about the Dogon people of Mali, Africa, who for centuries have described the invisible companion star of Sirius long before telescopes existed? Or the Nazca lines of Peru, massive geoglyphs that can only be seen from the air, yet carved by a people who had no recorded means of flight. Each example adds another piece to the puzzle, another whisper from an age that refuses to die. Perhaps this is the greatest mystery of all, not that our ancestors were primitive, but that they were remembering. They were rebuilding a shattered legacy, piece by piece, guided by myths that were really memories. And those memories still echo in our languages, our rituals, and our architecture, proof that the story of humanity did not begin in caves, but in the ashes of something older, something greater. The global code is not just history, it's prophecy, because it tells us that everything is connected, every culture, every mind, every star. And when we decode it fully, we may not only rediscover our past, we may understand our future. Every civilization dreams it will last forever. Every empire believes its walls will never fall. But history, real history, is older and crueler than pride. It has erased worlds greater than ours, and time remembers their silence more clearly than their glory. There was once a world before this one, a civilization that walked with the stars, spoke in the language of mathematics, and built monuments that could outlast ages. A world we now call myth, Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu. Names that sound like fantasy, but echo through every ancient culture on Earth. Yet beneath those names lies a single truth. Once, before 10,000 BC, humanity was different. And then it ended. The cause was not war, but nature itself. Science now confirms what myths have always whispered, that around 12,800 years ago, something struck the planet. A cosmic impact, perhaps a comet, shattered the calm of an age. The Younger Dryas, a sudden violent freeze that plunged the world into chaos. Glaciers melted. Oceans rose. Forests burned. The earth trembled as rivers changed course and skies turned black. And in the flood and fire that followed, a chapter of humanity was erased. Plato wrote of Atlantis, a mighty civilization that vanished in a single day and night of misfortune. In the Bible, the flood of Noah washes away a sinful world. In Sumer, the Epic of Gilgamesh speaks of the same deluge. In India, the Manu legend tells of a great flood that reset the cycle of life. Even in the Americas, the Hopi remember the third world destroyed by water, while the Aztecs speak of the suns, ages of humanity that rise and fall like waves. These are not coincidences. They are fragments of memory, ancient voices describing the same apocalypse in different tongues. Imagine the terror of that moment, tide swallowing mountains, cities crumbling into the sea, the sky falling as if the gods themselves had turned against the world. And in the midst of it, survivors, scattered, lost, carrying whatever fragments of knowledge they could save. They became the seeds of the next age, the wanderers who would rebuild civilization from the ruins. They remembered the stars, the geometry, the wisdom of the old world, but not all of it. Each generation lost a little more, until what was once science became myth, and what was once history became legend. Yet even now, the scars of that cataclysm remain. At the bottom of the Atlantic, near the Azores, sonar reveals structures that seem unnatural, symmetrical walls, submerged platforms. Off the coast of India, near Dwarka, archaeologists found an ancient city buried beneath the sea, its ruins dating far older than expected. In the Gulf of Cambay, under 40 meters of water, lie the outlines of streets and temples, a city lost more than 9,000 years ago. And beneath the sands of Egypt, the Sphinx bears marks of water erosion, not desert winds, but rain, suggesting it once stood in a world where the Sahara was green. Before the flood, the evidence whispers the same message. Something vast, something global happened, and our ancestors, the survivors, began again. We often think of human history as a line, from primitive to advanced, but perhaps it is not a line at all. Perhaps it is a circle, cycles of rise, fall, and rebirth. Civilizations reach their peak, then nature resets the clock, and the survivors carry the flame into the next dawn. If that is true, then we are not the first advanced civilization on Earth, merely the latest. The ancients called it the first world, a world of harmony between nature and knowledge, a world destroyed not by greed but by imbalance, a cosmic shift that tilted the order of all things. And maybe that is the greatest lesson hidden in myth, that power without balance leads to ruin, whether it comes from technology or from the heavens. Today, as we look at the melting ice caps, the rising seas, the shifting climate, the earth seems to whisper again. It has seen this before. Civilizations rise in brilliance, forget their origins, and fall into silence. Only the stones remain. Perhaps the ancients left us warnings carved into their monuments and encoded in myth, not to glorify their past, but to protect our future. They knew the pattern of time, the rhythm of destruction and renewal, and they left clues for when the cycle would return. Maybe that time is now, because every golden age ends not in darkness, but in transformation. And from the ashes of the first world came the seeds of the next. Egypt, Sumer, India, the Andes, each born from the memory of a civilization that refused to die. As the waters receded, and sunlight touched the broken stones of a drowned age, the survivors began to build again, guided by stars, haunted by memory, and driven by the question that still defines humanity. Who were we before we forgot ourselves? When the floodwaters finally began to retreat, the world was unrecognizable. Where once stood cities of stone, now there were only islands and silence. The sky had cleared, but the earth had changed. Forests drowned, mountains shifted, climates reversed. And from the wreckage of the first world, a new humanity began to rise. They were the survivors, wanderers of a shattered age, scattered across continents, carrying nothing but memory and myth. They built fires where oceans once raged. They told stories of the gods who walked among them, the cities that sank, and the stars that once guided their ancestors home. To their children, those stories became legends. To their descendants, those legends became faith. And slowly, from memory, myth, and survival, civilization was born again. It began not with empires, but with whispers. The survivors taught others to watch the stars, to plant crops with the seasons, to measure time with the sun and moon. They remembered how to shape stone, how to build with precision and harmony. They laid the first blueprints of order after chaos, and from those scattered groups emerged the dawn of our recorded history. Sumer, Egypt, the Indus Valley, China, and the Andes, each claiming to be the first, yet all sharing the same seed of forgotten knowledge. The Sumerians suddenly appeared with mathematics, writing, astronomy, and law, as if civilization had emerged fully formed. Egypt rose with divine geometry, sacred architecture, and the mystery of the pyramids. The Indus people built cities aligned to cardinal points, with sewage systems more advanced than those built thousands of years later. In the Americas, the ancestors of the Maya mapped the heavens with astonishing precision, and in every corner of the world the same story echoed. We were taught by the gods. But maybe the gods were not divine at all. Maybe they were simply the last remnants of the lost age, those who remembered what others had forgotten. The architects of memory, the bringers of light in a darkened world. The Egyptian texts call them the followers of Horus, the Shemsu-Hor, beings who ruled before the first pharaohs, keepers of an older wisdom. The Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki, who came from the heavens to teach humankind. In South America, the Inca told of Viracocha, the bearded god who rose from the sea to rebuild the world after the flood. In India, the Vedas describe the return of Manu, who survived the deluge to plant the seeds of a new age. Different lands, same story. The rebirth of civilization, guided by those who carried the flame of the first world, and perhaps this is why so many ancient cultures began with perfection, not progress. They did not climb from barbarism to brilliance. They descended from greatness into survival and then remembered. The step pyramids, the star temples, the sacred mathematics. All were echoes of an older design, adapted to a new earth. What we call the beginning of civilization may actually be its recovery. As the centuries passed, myth replaced memory. The survivors became gods in the stories. Their knowledge turned to miracles, their science to magic. And the great pattern, the geometry, the astronomy, the cosmic order, slowly faded into religion, mystery, and forgotten symbols. Humanity had risen again, but without knowing what it had lost. Yet something remained, a pulse, a code written into our architecture, our art, our language. The same fascination with the stars, the same longing to understand our origin. It lives in every temple, every equation, every question we ask about who we are and where we come from. We think we are explorers of the future, but in truth we are seekers of the past. Every discovery, every invention, every dream of reaching the stars, it all comes from a place deep within us that remembers what it once knew. It is not curiosity, it is remembrance. And maybe that is the true wonder of humanity, that we are the bridge between worlds. We carry the memory of what was and the potential of what can be. We are the children of survivors, born from the ashes of an age that refused to die. The ancients left us clues not only to their world, but to our destiny, a message hidden in stone, in myth, and in the stars themselves. You are not the beginning. You are the continuation. So when we look at the Great Pyramid, or the ruins of Sumer, or the silent stones of Machu Picchu, we are not staring at the works of strangers. We are looking into a mirror, a reflection of what humanity once was, and what it might become again. Because history is not a straight line, it is a circle, and every time it turns, the old world dies, so that the new one can remember. The story of 10,000 BC is not about the past. It's about us, because what we call history is only the surface of memory, and beneath it, the earth still hums with the echoes of worlds that came before, Every discovery we make, every ruin we uncover, every myth we translate brings us closer to remembering who we were. And the deeper we dig, the more we realize we are not the first to ask these questions. We are not the first to reach for the stars. We are only continuing a journey that began long before our written words, long before our cities, long before our understanding of time itself. The people of the first world may be gone, but their spirit never died. It lives in the geometry of our buildings, in the mathematics of our science, in the rhythm of our heartbeat. It lives in the way we gaze at the night sky and wonder what lies beyond. It lives in the human need to create, to question, to dream. Perhaps that is the greatest inheritance of all, not the stones or the monuments, but the fire of curiosity. A light passed down through the ages, from the builders of the pyramids to the scientists of today, from the survivors of the flood to the explorers of the cosmos, from them. To us, the ancients once said, to remember is to awaken. Maybe our time, this modern age of technology and discovery, is the moment when humanity finally begins to awaken again. Maybe our satellites, our telescopes, our artificial minds are just new forms of the same quest, the same search for connection, for understanding, for truth. We've spent centuries calling them myths, but perhaps the myths were never lies, only memories we forgot how to interpret. Atlantis, Lemuria, the gods who taught mankind, maybe they were not fables, but messages from ourselves, written in the language of eternity. Because if we have learned one thing from the silence of history, it is this: knowledge can be buried but never destroyed. It waits in stone, in stars, in us, until we are ready to see it again. So when you stand beneath the sky tonight, and you look at the stars that once guided the builders of forgotten worlds, remember this: you are part of that same story. You are the descendant of survivors, the child of cosmic memory, the living continuation of a journey 10,000 years in the making. The ancients watched the heavens and saw gods. We watch the heavens and see galaxies, but maybe in truth we are both right, because the divine was never out there. It was always within, and perhaps one day, when our own world has turned to dust and silence, when the monuments we build today lie beneath the sands of time, another generation will rise. They will uncover our traces, wonder who we were, and feel that same electric echo of recognition. And in that moment, the circle will complete once more, because history never ends. It only sleeps, waiting for us to remember. You've been watching the Wonder Lab, where we explore the mysteries that shape our world and the secrets that time refuses to bury. If this journey has sparked your curiosity, awakened your imagination, or made you question what you thought you knew, then don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because here at the Wonder Lab, the quest for knowledge never ends. It only begins again